Has the Shard of Valor been discreetly involved with Roshar's future the whole time? And if so, were the other shards involved? And why has Endowment been so desperate to keep Hoid away from Valor? Welcome to Second Breakfast. My name's Lee. Join me to explore the lore, theories, and biggest questions of the Cosmere, because if I have the questions, maybe you do too. If that sounds like your cup of tea, consider subscribing and joining us for future journeys into the Cosmere. Before starting, I'd once again like to credit Rayse Should Be Braised. If you haven't viewed his discussions, I'd implore you to seek them out for the cutting edge of Cosmere theory crafting. Now then, in Wind and Truth there is a letter that changes everything. Endowment writes to Hoid and says, "I have plans to deal with Odium. As I have told you before, I would not explain them to you." The distinction here is clear. Endowment is choosing not to explain her plans. A deliberate, conscious choice to keep Hoid out of the picture. But as a reminder, who is Hoid? Over millennia, Hoid has systematically collected investiture from every world that he visits. He has lightweaving from Yolan and Roshar, Allomancy from Scadrial, breath from Nalthis, and we know that he has access to the Aeon Door. He has been alive since the 16 of the original Shard vessels were just people. Ordinary people that had not yet become gods, and that he would have known personally. He described 80, the man who would later become Ruin, as a once kind and generous man. He counted Rayse, who had become the single greatest threat the Cosmere has ever faced, among his friends, and yet Endowment will not tell him her plans. He is, by almost any measure, one of the most connected and most informed individuals in the Cosmere, yet Endowment has simply decided that she cannot trust him with this. Why? Later, in that same letter, she would go on to say, "All I will say is that I kept my bargain. I did not go in person at her request for aid." A request for aid from Valor, and reference to the promise the vessels made during the shattering of Adenausium that the Shards would not interfere with each other in person. But to understand this bargain and who is at the centre of it, let's take a look at the Shard of Valor. Valor is a shard we know almost nothing about, but what we do know is this. Its vessel was named Medelantorius, and was a dragon. Brandon has confirmed that exactly 2 dragon vessels exist in the Cosmere, correcting himself on this as recently as December 2025. Medelantorius is one, and Cultivation's vessel, Corellia Mavast, is the other. Similarly, Brandon has also confirmed that Hoid has previously dated Medelantorius, and that they have a fun and storied history together. And so it seems before the shattering of Adenausium, Hoid and Medelantorius were romantically involved. And now consider what the shattering did to them. Medelantorius took up Valor, and like all vessels would have slowly started losing her own mind to the intent of the Shard. That is what holding a Shard does to its vessels. We've watched it again and again. 80, who was previously described as kind and generous, became Ruin, the embodiment of entropy and destruction. Tanavast became increasingly bound by the intent of honour, and Rayse was charming enough that Hoid called him a friend, and yet he became potentially the single greatest threat in the Cosmere. 10,000 years under a Shard's intent changes a person. It consumes them until the line between vessel and the power blurs beyond recognition. And Medelantorius will be no exception, and she has been carrying Valor for 10,000 years. How much of her is truly left? In Rhythm of War, Harmony tells Hoid that Valor wanted to speak with him. She was reaching out, and in Wind and Truth, Endowment's letter shuts that down. She contradicts that entirely, with what the community suggests is an exaggerated vehemence. The kind of denial that tells you something's up. Endowment is running interference, actively keeping Hoid away from Valor. And once you know about Hoid and Medelantorius, the whole thing reads almost like a friend protecting from someone's terrible ex. That is the history that underpins this entire discussion, and is precisely why I think that Endowment cuts Hoid out of the letter entirely. A strategic move, rather than an act of cruelty. In this very letter, Endowment does seem to show some sort of respect for Hoid, but cuts him out anyway. Because if Hoid knows where Valor is and what she's doing, he will go to her, and in going to her, he risks exposing everything. His desire to speak with her may be a vulnerability in Endowment's plan that cannot be afforded to be risked. And Harmony, of course, will not be up to speed on Hoid's past with Medelantorius to the same degree as someone who was there at the time. But at the end of Wind and Truth, Hoid resolves to find her anyway. And knowing Hoid, with his ability with fortune, he is going to find her. Whether the woman he's looking for still exists after 10,000 years is a different question entirely. But before we get there, let's now talk about Nightblood. you know Nightblood as the eccentric yet terrifying sword carried by Szeth-son-son-Vallano, Vasher and Vivenna, the sword that drains investiture at an unsustainable rate, a sword that can talk, and the one that killed Rayse. Nightblood was created on Nalthis, the world of Warbreaker. He was created by two awakeners named Vasher and Shashara, using 1,000 breaths. Awakened Steel required the 9th heightening, so 20,000 breaths for the Awakener, and together they gave him a single command: destroy evil. The problem is that Nightblood cannot distinguish evil. He has no framework for it, no moral compass, no contextual understanding, no ability to weigh intent against action. And so he defaults to consuming everything. Radiance, fused, shard vessels. It does not matter. He drinks investiture indiscriminately, and he does so with a large dose of cheerful enthusiasm. After seeing the power of Nightblood, Shashara wanted to further her awakened steel and make more. But to prevent more death, Vasher killed her, because one Nightblood in his estimation was one too many. Nightblood is made from breaths. Endowment's investiture. At a fundamental level, Nightblood is a weapon constructed from the power of the Shard of Nalthis. He is, in the deepest sense, hers. Eventually, Vasher brought Nightblood to Roshar, who appears in the series as Zahel, the cynical, unimpressed swordmaster who trained Kaladin and Renarin in the early books. For the most part, Zahel just wants to be left alone with his profound irritation at everything. Eventually, Vasher and Nightblood part ways on Roshar. Subsequently, Nightblood eventually passes into the hands of the Nightwatcher, Cultivation's own great spren. And the Nightwatcher offers it to Dalinar during his visit to the valley, the same visit where he trades away his memories of Evie. As we know, Dalinar didn't leave with Nightblood, but it later passes to Nael, Herald of Justice, who at the end of Words of Radiance gives it to Szeth, freshly restored after his death at the Battle of Narok. Szeth becomes Dalinar's sworn man, and Nightblood goes everywhere Szeth does. So by the time the assassination of Rayse occurs at the end of Rhythm of War, the weapon is exactly where it needs to be, in the hands of Dalinar's guard and Taravangian's jailer. The theory holds that this is not a coincidence, that the path from Nalthis to Roshar to Szeth was intentional, that someone was moving the pieces. And to understand who and why, let's now spend some time with cultivation. Before the events of the series, Taravangian visits the Nightwatcher. He asks for the capacity to save the world. As is typical, the boon is granted, but with a curse. And so Taravangian's days are marked by varying intelligence and emotional sensitivity. This leads to the diagram, the grand strategic document that drives Taravangian's every decision through multiple books, and was produced on his day of greatest intelligence. And so, through the Nightwatcher, cultivation shaped Taravangian into an individual with the capacity to bring down a god. As previously discussed, she also aided Dalinar, removing his memories of Evie, his wife that he accidentally killed at Rathalas. It could be suggested that cultivation did this so that Odium could not use his own guilt against him before she was ready. She was protecting an investment and ensuring that the pieces only come together when she intended them to. And in Wind and Truth, Odium highlighted this fact, stating that cultivation is in support of the war on the basis that it encourages growth, and importantly, she does not deny it. Given all the wars across Roshar's history, cultivation's involvement has been seemingly minimal, and really, she was waiting across millennia until the board was set exactly how she needed it. And then came the assassination. Szeth stabs Taravangian in the chest. As Taravangian is dying, as he is suffering, he is pulled into a vision by Odium, when suddenly Taravangian felt a sudden feeling of bravery, and from that bravery, Taravangian takes up Nightblood's cognitive aspect, and he kills Rayse. And so, cultivation shaped Taravangian over years into precisely the candidate the moment required. A man with the genius to see it coming, and on the right day, an emotional day, the kind of raw humanity that Rayse, for all his power, could not have anticipated. There are also theorists that suggest that cultivation was even involved in the creation of Nightblood through the essence of night, and we know that the Nightwatcher previously held this weapon. Her involvement in this death is not tangential, it's almost direct. But there is something in this passage that does not belong to cultivation. Her influence across this story is about suffering and then growth, about long-term positioning. It is patient. It is, as Odium accuses, often indifferent to suffering in the short term. Cultivation's influence explains why Taravangian was in that room. It explains why he was capable of taking the opportunity. But the text draws our attention to something strangely specific in the moment itself. Bravery. And if there is one shard in the Cosmere whose intent is perfectly aligned with a sudden surge of courage at a critical moment, it is Valor. If you've liked the video so far, like and subscribe for more content, so that you can be there when the next video about Vasher goes live. But anyway, let's continue. With Taravangian as the new vessel of Odium, he is subsequently taken up by Cultivation on a tour of the Cosmere. She leads him to gaze upward, towards the stars. He stands rooted on Roshar. He can see the other world, but he cannot visit them, by virtue of the limitation imposed on him by his predecessors' agreements with Honour and Cultivation. In any case, he looks and he takes stock of the cosmic order. Odium noticed 2 missing shards. One that he eventually can account for, who we believe is a Shard of Reason, but he specifically notes that Valor is completely invisible to him, hidden so thoroughly that even a god cannot locate her. Cultivation is directing his gaze towards other systems and other worlds, and at the end of the tour, she and Taravangian pull their focus back down to Roshar, the one place he was never really looking. The theory, originally proposed by Rayse should be praised, is that Valor is not somewhere distant, hidden across the Cosmere. Valor is on Roshar. Hidden in the one place her enemy would never think to search, right under Odium's nose for as long as it took, because discretion, as they say, is the better part of valour. A phrase with Shakespearean origins in Henry IV that explores the idea of honour and survival. The individual who says this, Sir John Falstaff, coins this term on the thought process that suggests that dying in bravery is not valorous and no good to anyone, suggesting that true valour is survival. The truth is that Sir John was a coward. But could a connection to Stormlight Archive be made here? Could Valor's inherent hiding and discretion be intentional and in keeping with the idea of valour? The proverb is, after all, used much more positively in modern language, about considering the wisdom of knowing when not to fight, rather than charging ahead recklessly. As we know, a Shard's intent shapes his vessel. We know that intimately by now. The Shard of Valor, broadly understood, is bravery, courage, standing firm, charging when others retreat. That is not the disposition of a Shard that would tolerate endless passiveness in its vessel without justification. The intent would push against that concealment. The Shard would not allow its vessel to simply hide across millennia without purpose, not without consequence. Not without the kind of internal erosion that we've seen destroy other vessels. So if Valor has been hiding on Roshar, the only coherent explanation is that the hiding was itself the most courageous possible act. Waiting patiently for the singular moments when action would matter most. When everything had finally aligned. When the right weapon was in the right hands and the right man was dying in front of the right shard. We also know that dragons such as Cultivation and Valor's vessels have the ability to transport their mind to the Spirit Shore, a region within the spiritual realm where dragons commune. Could this be ground zero for the plot to assassinate a god? Let me remind you of Endowment's letter. All I will say is that I kept my bargain. I did not go in person at her request for aid. Valor asked for something specific, something Endowment could provide without crossing to Roshar itself, without drawing attention and breaking the isolation that she had so carefully maintained. What does Endowment have that a Shard trying to kill Rayse would need? A weapon capable of consuming a Shard's vessel, built from her own investiture, already on Roshar and already in the right hands. Nightblood. The theory holds that the chain of custody that had brought him from Vasher to Szeth was not accidental. Vasher arrived on Roshar with the sword. Cultivation, who has demonstrated across the entire series that she is always moving pieces, took him in, through the Night Watcher. Eventually it passes to Nael, and Nael handed the sword to Szeth. Szeth killed Taravangian, and Taravangian, shaped by Cultivation to be the precise instrument the assassination required, was in the room when Rayse was most vulnerable. Cultivation positioned the assassin, Endowment provided the weapon, and Valor, hidden on Roshar for as long as she needed to be, reached through at the exact moment and gave a dying old man the bravery to act. That sense of bravery that originally seemed so strange and out of character. 3 shards, 1 plan, and the death of Rayse. I want to add something here, because another member of the community flagged a moment from Oathbringer that reinforces this theory. There is a scene where a voice whispers in Dalinar's mind, "Unite them." The Stormfather denies saying it, but Dalinar assumes that it must be the Stormfather anyway, because who else could it be? But if Valor is present on Roshar, if she has been quietly influencing events from within, reaching through the same way that she reached Taravangian at the moment of the assassination, then perhaps the voice was hers, pretending to be someone Dalinar would recognise, nudging the bondsmith towards unity, moving a piece on a board that Cultivation, for all her patience, had not been able to move directly and was also being groomed by Odium's unmade The Thrill. Could Valor also be the mysterious being that saved Dalinar's soul at the end of Wind and Truth from the clasp of Odium? Could she be the one responsible for Dalinar's visions of Noadon at the very end of the series, whereby Noadon seems a bit more sentient than usual, a bit more human? But going back to Taravangian, consider how Taravangian experienced the bravery surge. It felt entirely natural to him. Why? It's because Shardic influence is woven into the cosmic order. It could not be any more natural. And finally, consider this art from the year of Dragonsteel Nexus 2024. A dragon holding Nightblood. A curious choice. Perhaps an on-the-nose reference of Valor's involvement in the assassination of Rayse. But perhaps it's simply cultivation. It would certainly match her description. But this has been a lot, so let's bring it all together. Endowment kept a bargain with Valor. She provided Nightblood through her return, the one weapon in the Cosmere capable of consuming a Shards vessel from Vasher to Nael, then to Szeth. We don't know how Nightblood got from the Nightwatcher to Nael, but what we do know is that Cultivation Spren had it. And it still ended up exactly where it needed to be. Cultivation built the assassin across decades, and manoeuvred him into position. And Valor supplied the one thing that Taravangian, on his most emotional day, could not have summoned alone. The courage to attack a god. And Hoid, the one person who might have seen it coming, the one person whose history with Medelantorius could have unravelled the whole thing if he had found her at the wrong moment, was kept completely in the dark. A smart decision when we know that Hoid's strange ability to be where he needs to be, when he needs to be there. Because love is not a variable that a conspiracy of this precision can accommodate for a man as relentless and opportunistic as Hoid. But now, whatever comes at the beginning of Arc 2, Hoid is looking for Medelantorius. Whether 10,000 years of carrying Valor has left enough of Medelantorius to recognise the man that she used to know. That might be the most important reunion in the back half of the entire series, and it is an answer that we will not get for many years. To close this video out, what I keep coming back to with this theory is how cleanly it rewards the kind of reading that the Cosmere demands. The evidence is in the small details. It is in the letters and the gaps, in the things the characters refuse to say, and the feelings that are strangely out of place. Sanderson has been building towards this across multiple books, and whether or not every detail of this theory proves correct, the shape of it feels believable. What do you think? Has Valor really been hiding all this time? I'm not so sure. It feels unlikely, but perhaps she has been maintaining her subterfuge whilst continuing to influence events, in keeping with that age-old proverb. It is an awful lot of weight for that phrase to carry. 3 shards in secret against a common enemy. Already in keeping with the Sunmaker's gambit, in a kind of way. And the greatest wildcard in the Cosmere was kept out of the room, for love and due to his unnatural ability to get what he wants. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and get in the comments. I am responding to every single one. Vote on the next topic in the community post, because if I have the question, maybe you do too. I'll see you in the next one.